Okay, here with Jason Ishmael, lead pastor of Antioch Christian Church in Eastern Iowa. I'm Daniel McCoy, editorial director for renew.org, here also with John Whitaker of the Listener's Bible Commentary. And of course, John and I just recently wrote Following Jesus in a Politically Divided World. So we're here with Jason. And Jason, you have been through your first Iowa caucus season as a lead minister in the great state of Iowa. And my guess is that you had to be fairly intentional about keeping focused on the main thing. What is the main thing? And, what are some kind of shiny counterfeits that come along in an election year?
Yeah, man, this is it's interesting, right? Because we're pursuing Christ. I want to be like Jesus in every possible way. Not a better version of me. Not a slightly improved, less sinning, slightly more moral or ethical or empathetic. I want to be like Jesus entirely. Do the things that Jesus does, care about the things that Jesus cares about. And so when I think about the main thing, it's having a relationship with God like Jesus does. That's loving God. That's I want to have a connection to people and an impact on people like Jesus does as loving people. And I want to spend my life concerned with the things that Jesus concerned his life with. The way that he spent his life was pouring into others in discipleship. And so it's nice to just put that out there, but then you get into these gray areas where you think, man, I could be helpful in this, but at what cost? Would it cost the main thing? And I think for us as a church in Eastern Iowa, we're in the Cedar Rapids area, a couple 100,000 people in Greater Cedar Rapids. Everybody's surprised to hear that, by the way. There are people in Iowa, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
When you get that first round of caucuses, especially in the GOP side, and especially this particular cycle, any of the hopefuls understand that if they're going to get through, Iowa at least needs to go well. They have to show that they've got a fighting chance. And, in this particular cycle, you got a guy like Ron DeSantis who essentially went all in on Iowa, spent the entire year canvassing Iowa. I think it was his goal to get physically to every single county in the state of Iowa. And if he wins Iowa, or if he shows something close in Iowa, that changes the next states after. And so, among a couple of other candidates, what happens is these guys will do what they should do strategically. They're going to try to find piles of people where they can get help. And so that means, for many of them, they're going to contact some churches and, hey, is there any way that we can, have our candidate at your church? We want to meet some people. And so, of course, you think about, how does that happen? I'm in literally my first year leading there. And so there's a lot of things that end up being said. There's a lot of precedents that will be set. What kind of guy is this going to be? And where I really wrestled is this thought that, man, I feel like I could help someone. I feel like I could help a candidate that might do some really good things. At the same time, though, what happens when you show up to our church and it's in the service of something else, that, especially for somebody that might not share the same convictions that I do, where I think, man, this just seems like a close thing. This person, well, hold on, I got to church and all of a sudden it's not Jesus. It's about this candidate that's there. It's going to be speaking and these sorts of things. And man, it was funny because I thought, well, what if we do help a candidate get there? Obviously that didn't happen. It's not going to happen because we're not that big a deal. But what if we did? I think it's interesting that, say that person ends up in the Oval Office. Are they going to look back and go, man, what would we have done without Antioch Christian Church in Cedar Rapids, Iowa? Like, no way. It's like one blip on a series of things that's going to happen. And so even the illusion of having some kind of, worldly prominence or being significant in some way, all of that is a far cry from what Jesus has already extended to us and things we're actually getting to do with him that are eternal right now.
That's interesting. I mean, in all my years of ministry in Idaho, I don't think there's ever an occasion where a potential candidate reached out to me as a pastor or a church that I know of and asked if they could speak at our church or come to our church and meet people. So I didn't even know that was a thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
we're a big deal.
Iowa's a big deal. Do you mean in Iowa, I guess? I mean, do a lot of pastors go that option and kind of put their eggs in the basket of a particular candidate and let them come in and this is who they're backing and this is what, is that really a thing in Iowa?
Yeah, it's not uncommon. The interesting thing is that a lot of folks are wise about the way they engage us in saying things like, hey, this candidate's going to come and have a forum in our community, and we just happen to be hosting that. And so it gives them this degree of separation. It's like, no, we're not endorsing this candidate. The challenge, though, is that most of the time we'd give a platform for a conservative candidate that shares faith and values with us. But I, for me personally, I couldn't say, hey, we're just going to give a forum to somebody, and we'd give a forum to anybody, they want to participate in the democratic process, when the reality is that if I would probably be a really quick no for someone who didn't share in our values. And so you get into this really sticky place where, okay, we might share some values. Do we share all of our values? And they've always been, everybody that we dealt with was awesome. Like they didn't put pressure on us. They were okay hearing no. At the same time, though, all the pressure for me was internal. Should I say yes to this or should I say no to this? And, there was no presumption of, hey, we're going to preach a sermon at your church. It was like, hey, we'd love to be in the lobby. Is it okay if, take some lobby space and, maybe you can tell everybody that so-and-so is here. Dealt with us well, but man, like if you have somebody that's at your church that has a particular political platform, like no amount of, well, we're just a forum is going to offer any, it's an implicit endorsement.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's just very interesting to me. Cause like I said, I've never experienced that here in Idaho. So that's very interesting.
It was literally months in wrestling with it. Thankfully, I didn't have to make the decision by myself. We had that conversation in our eldership, and all came to we got to share our conviction there. So we get to share the win or share the loss.
Yeah. Well, and like in a nutshell, what is that conviction from your elders, from you? What becomes the conviction that drives the decision-making process? And no, we're not going to do that because that would be to endorse such and such candidate. Like, I just think that kind of thinking might be helpful to people. So what was that conviction?
Yeah. Well, nothing revolutionary here, but it's mission. It's mission first. Does this cost the mission? And the reality is, it would cost the mission a lot. We're in a place that tends to lean in more and more. I think this is not an old thing in Iowa. Iowa's had quite a bit of political parity in our lifetime. But in the last 10 years has tended toward red as conservative Democrats have disenfranchised. And we've seen more and more of that. Iowa is kind of a freshly minted ruby red state. I think we're one of two states right now in the country that's sending a pure 100% Republican delegation to the House. And even Des Moines has a Republican U.S. rep. But those are really, really tight races. And so you just think about, for us, if we're going to draw a line in the sand, I'm automatically disenfranchising in a very, very hot climate. I'm disenfranchising 30 to 40% of our people, and I'm very conservatively estimating that. That's giving the red side a ton of credit, if not half of the potential people that we would connect to. That say, oh no, you stand for stuff that I'm totally against and offended by, so that I could hopefully gain some political points. I think we get a lot farther when Jesus is still the main thing and remains the main thing.
Yeah, that's good.
So when you keep the main thing, what groups of people will you end up disappointing? And how do you help?
Well, both sides. It's an equal offense. I think we have politically active people that feel called to that forum, and I think that's awesome. Actually, our U.S. rep is from our church, and she's fantastic. She loves Jesus. She's been faithful to the Lord. She's called to what she's doing, contends for the gospel, contends for truth in a really difficult environment. The challenge, though, is that, you've got people that would hope that if, hey, I'm politically active in my life, And I'd like for the church to put their shoulder behind this. And anybody that can mix politics and their mission is gonna be in that mode. And I totally understand that. Like, I get why someone would see if you're called in that, and you feel that the Lord has placed you in those things, and you're living out your convictions biblically in those forums. Why wouldn't my church get behind me? Because I'm on mission for Jesus, and you guys say you're on mission for Jesus. So why don't you join me in this?
Yeah.
That's forgetting that we've lopped off another half that would have the same frustrations with us when we preach something about marriage or about life. Says, whoa, hold on a second. That's not like, I don't understand why you guys are saying this thing about abortion or about marriage or gender. We've got both of those 20% on both of those sides that are politically active and want to move, and wonder why we're not joining them. We look like the ones that, this is where you see it. The people who see us, our response to these things, like not having a candidate on a weekend at our church, would say, man, that lacks courage. There's cowardice in this, and we need people who are willing to step up and step out in boldness. Like, I totally agree that we need people to step out in boldness. The thing I love to ask from these folks, though, is like, okay, I agree that you need to be stepping out in boldness. Who are you discipling? What are their names? Because that to me is stepping out in boldness. Who's the last person you had a conversation with about faith decisions? And because we need boldness there. That's actually where the fight is.
Yeah.
It spills over into Capitol Hill and the state capitol, into our school boards. But if we're not having those personal conversations, who cares if we have allies at every level of government if we're not going to confront sin personally and actually give people opportunities to respond to Jesus and be discipled?
Yeah, no, that's good. I think I guess it seems to me that the tension point around all that is you got a member of your congregation who it seems like, well, she loves Jesus, right? And so there's the tension point. Don't we want Jesus loving people, trying to bring wisdom and righteousness and justice to the government? So you got that. What you're saying is, but at the same time, there's people who maybe they're part of the church, or maybe they're not part of the church. They don't think that way. They don't yet know Jesus. How do we want to ostracize them by getting behind her? Is that kind of what I'm hearing you say?
Right. Well, and the cool thing about our gal, it's Ashley Henson, by the way, that's our U.S. rep. Not a single time has she ever put pressure on me to say, hey, it's going to be a pretty tough election cycle. Like, could you throw us a bone? Like, just faithful and consistent, get to pray and support her, but not in a way that is ever like, she's never expected platform. And of all the people that could, you would think like, she's kind of got it coming, right? Volunteers, been a long time person, like, and so there's just something, I think there's a lot of faith in that to say, hey, I'm just going to trust the Lord. I think she really embodies in a lot of ways the attitude that we want in something like this. And so, she's one of us. And so I think it's a totally different conversation than when, somebody that's not necessarily part of our fellowship is saying, hey, we'd love to have you champion our cause.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hearing you say, tell me if this is accurate. Are you saying that the main thing, at the heart of the main thing really is helping the church, helping God's people be the kind of people that both live as disciples and make disciples, and we don't want to compromise that for the sake of endorsing a particular candidate? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. The irony is we're going to actually get a lot farther in the mission. If say that we want to, stack the deck in the school board or in politics or wherever, the best way to get there is to disciple people. I've never changed my mind because of a billboard or a commercial.
Yeah.
I've changed my mind because somebody was pouring their life into me in significant ways. That person actually that mentored me when I was in high school and college still shapes my thinking.
Yeah.
Still shapes the way that I approach politics even. And so you get farther anyway when the main thing is the main thing.
Yeah. You make a bigger change in society, make a bigger difference in society when people's hearts are changed because they've actually learned to follow Jesus.
Yep.
Yeah, I think about the third temptation when the devil was tempting Jesus, the third one in Matthew, bow to me, I'll give you all the kingdoms. We tend to look at that and think, well, he's not going to want the kingdoms. That's ridiculous. Why would he want the kingdom? No, he does, and he will, and he'll get them, but he won't get them that way. And what I hear you saying is like there is there is a growth of the church into society that is a real growth, the kingdom moving forward that doesn't rest in political means to get there. Is that safe to say, you think?
Yeah, because we want people to participate. We want people to participate in the process. I think that if you're a citizen of the United States of America in a democratic republic, you have this opportunity for a voice that is significant. And you could say, well, we're never going to win this thing anyway, so we're going to sit out. We're going to be dissidents and, do our own thing. Again, if the Lord's calling somebody to do that, you need to be obedient to that. From my standpoint, I go, man, how many disciples can I raise up that when they participate are going to be equipped to have their own convictions, not just convictions that someone else has offloaded onto them, they've adopted. Hey, pastor, can you just tell me what to think about X, X, and X? No, I want to equip somebody to actually be able to think for themselves. Man, of all the things, I love the notion of Socratic method, being able to rationalize your own viewpoint. What a powerful thing, even to be able to rationalize your own viewpoint. When we talk about people sharing their testimony, their own faith, that's literally what they're doing. They're rationalizing their own position. To have those types of tools in ethical issues as well, you become a much more valuable participant than if you just said, well, the note card told me this is who we want, and I don't really know why. I just know that this is what our clan is saying.
Yeah. And that's good. And particularly even the word clan is important in that last sentence, right? Like it becomes this clan mentality. We just do what we do, and for good or for ill. And I think you're right. The kingdom of God will advance further and maybe not faster, but further and more deeply and more powerfully if we take Jesus seriously and say our job is to make disciples. That's our job. We're going to do that well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's incredible. I mean, the percentage of people that are actually participating in the mission, responding in obedience to the command to make disciples of all nations. I am amazed at how much the Lord is doing with such a small percentage of participants. Something I think is deep in my heart. I think we've been trying to perpetuate what has only been a disciple-making movement ever. It's never been anything other than that. We're trying to perpetuate it right now with as few disciple makers as possible. And I think that from the Far East and from the Middle East and Africa even, there just continues to be these waves that are crashing over the American church and more kind of being soaked by this wave of discipleship and going, oh, well, yeah, actually, like for me to say, that's the main thing, guys. And like nobody's sitting there going, wow, what a novel idea.
Yeah,
It's such an old idea and it's our oldest idea. We don't want it, and that's why it's good. That's why it's powerful.
And it has changed the world wherever it's gone and wherever it's been effective. So, yeah.
Jason, your master's was in church history and historical theology. When it comes to kind of the diverse configurations of church-state relationships throughout history, and there have been a lot of different variations, if you could hop in a time machine and go back to a particular era of church-state relationships, what is one era you would want to avoid? You would totally not go to this place. Just as a way of asking, is there a particular type of church-state relationship in history that you're just really not a fan of based on your studies?
Well, we see it happen over and over again. And it's funny because there's a part of us that's like, there are portions of the Christian faith in America that crave this. We need leverage and power. And I understand why. because we don't want some bad things to happen. I totally understand. But what happens when you get it? What happens when the word says the government doesn't bear the sword of God's wrath for nothing? To be able to tell someone else with the threat of the sword, do this or else. For me, I can't go rob a bank because the government's threatening me. There's fear that keeps me from doing that. I'm going to go to jail. I can't murder somebody because the government bears the sword of God's wrath. And that's not just talking about capital punishment. This is the thing that gives the government power, is that the police can shoot me or the army can take over my place. I don't live autonomously because they have physical leverage over me. So what happens when the church gets that physical leverage? What happens when you have an army that can support your convictions? This is very challenging because I would love to think that we're only going to do good things with it. And then you see literally every time it happens, Daniel's impossible to pick one that I would want to avoid, because I think about, even to the momentum killer that Constantine was to the movement of the church. And we're just talking generations in, and now it's financially beneficial to become a Christian. It's going to further your power in your career, in your prominence. That happens, and things start to unravel. You go to medieval times where you literally have popes with access to armies. You see the things that happen. I think it's always interesting to see what happens with Martin Luther when the French army gets involved. It's not just religion anymore. It's governments posturing and seeing where there's opportunity for power and for gain. And I even think about all of the Crusades and the things that happen when you've got access to that kind of power. At the heart of it, we'd love to say, man, the Crusades are all about getting the Holy Land back, and we're gonna win Jerusalem. Then what were we doing in Damietta, Egypt? To try to get Damietta so we could get Cairo, so we could have Egypt. That was 100% about money. It had nothing to do with the cause of Jesus. And the problem is that when the church gets that kind of power, we'd love to say that she's pure and it's nothing but upstanding folks who have high integrity and all the best of intentions. But the reality is, it isn't even that absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's that they're going to be wolves in the flock that get control of things and then are able to leverage the things of Christ for earthly purposes and for evil things. And so it's funny, anytime, it's just it's such an irony, because there's a part of me that's really man, we've got to win, we got to win votes, and then we're well, what happens if we do win and win and win and win and win and win and win, and we vanquish all of our enemies? There's no opposition to the gospel. And we've got what if you had to pray at school? You have to pray, because it's inevitable, right? We don't want to we want a good thing to happen. And we could do it in all the wrong ways throughout history. Anytime that we've have access to the army, have access to the sword, we make messes with it.
We take on characteristics of the beast. We become a little beastie like, and that's not a good thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
At Antioch, we did a series called Freedom and Fences, in which we kind of tackled the LGBTQ conversation, and I was just so grateful for that. And I would love, Jason, to give you an opportunity to kind of share how our church kind of handled that, and what was the response to that, because I do think that it was very helpful and a great way to engage those very important cultural and political issues. So yeah, could you take a moment and kind of share how we did that?
Yeah, well, I felt like in year one, there should be a lot of questions about a new leader, that church should be asking, can this person be trusted? Is this person going to be consistent in the word? Is this person going to be a person of integrity? Of course, we'd say, well, the elders interviewed him. It should be good to go. Like, well, yeah, of course. Like, we're going to trust the decisions that our leaders are making. But I think that it is okay to be asking those questions, not out of cynicism and skepticism, but to say, hey, is this person going to be faithful? We need to see it. And so we're trusting it's going to happen. We're hopeful that it's going to happen, but we need to see it. And so for me, one of those conversations in year one was to dive into to marriage. And for us, we have a culture that tends to use Paul speaking the truth in love as a cudgel. It is loving for me to be harsh. Because you needed to, that's tough love. And I think there's part of our culture that really warms to that. The problem is that I don't really see Jesus being described that way. Jesus is loving, and by being loving, he's going to punch somebody in the head with the truth. And even when Jesus is, think about the people he's harsh with, it's the Pharisees. And then we're the ones who act like Pharisees and, wonder why Jesus isn't cool with it. John 1 describes the person of Jesus in a way that I think encapsulates our approach to all of this. Whenever we're in an ethical dilemma, whenever we're trying to come up with, hey, how am I going to interact with people and hold my convictions in a way that is valuable and pure, Jesus is describing John 1 as being full of grace and full of truth. He was full of both of those things at the same time. I have truth and grace tension. And I'm constantly trying to find a balance. Even when I'm with my own kids, when I discipline my own children, I'm trying to find a balance of when I need to get after it and when I need to be, grace dad and surprise them with, hey, it's going to be okay. Wow, I thought you were going to ground me for life. I try to balance. Man, sometimes it's too much truth, sometimes it's too much grace, and I'm constantly trying to balance. There was not a day that Jesus said, man, I'm all truth and no grace today. I'm all grace and no truth. He's full of grace and full of truth. And that man quite literally lived that out in perfection, not just in balance. He was full of both of those things. Full not by being half truth, half grace, full by full truth, full grace. And so when we applied that to the marriage issue, the funny thing about that is that, and if you're going to read Romans 1, it says some very clear things about what is natural and what is unnatural, what God wants and what God doesn't want. But anybody who's read Romans 1 should also read Romans chapter 2. That's very clear. I think the harshest words in the opening chapters of Romans are not to those outside the church; they're to those inside the church. Hey, if you're gonna look at somebody else and see these errors, you need to be very careful that you're not doing them yourself. Likened to Jesus, speck in your brother's eye, plank in your own. And for us, it was really it was kind of funny because there were some people when we walked through this to say, okay, here is what Jesus teaches. Here's what he says about a man and a woman. Here's what Paul teaches about a man and a woman. We don't even need to get into the Old Testament to see what even just the New Testament establishes these things. To recognize that there is cost in that for anybody that might have come to us and say, wow, that's not how I live. That's not how I've been taught. That's different. Well, here's how I came to those conclusions. Here's the basis for why I believe this. And so if you have an issue, then you're going to wrestle with the word of God in that issue, and you're going to wrestle with your maker in that. Not Jason arguing me into a position about marriage or not. You've got to be able to do some of that yourself. And I don't know a better environment than one that is a community full of grace that's going to give the opportunity for someone to actually work that stuff out. And it takes time. The funny thing is that there are some folks that are very interested in our doctrine and our reputation being pristine. And so when somebody's at our church who's working out their salvation in fear and trembling and doesn't have it all figured out yet, the Pharisee thinks they make us look bad. And I say, great. Okay.
Jesus got that very same criticism, right? Like, you're hanging around with the wrong kinds of people, right? So
exactly. And so there were people that said, man, I wish you had really punched him harder. I'm like, I was talking to you, right?
Yeah.
So but that's the challenge. How do you build those things? And it's something I love about your book is that it not only gives, because it's easy just to tell people what to believe. That's like, we're all used to that. You can find somebody to tell you what to believe in every social media channel, in every coffee shop in the country. Somebody's going to be willing to tell you what is right according to them. But to be able to give some people some tools and handles to be able to say, okay, I'm in the scripture, but I really need to know how I build conviction based upon that. In things that seem sticky and things that sometimes feel gray. How do I walk through that? And that's something I love, the tools that you give, and then the way you apply that into, it's not just a tool, it's applied in specific ways over and again.
Yeah. Good.
That's great. John, you want to have kind of the last word as we're wrapping up?
I don't know if I have a great last word. I mean,
it better be good.
I think Jason has really kind of pointed us in the right direction. And what I love about everything that we've said from beginning to end of this conversation is this really revolved around forming people in Christ, right? So even the specific example of the marriage conversation being full of grace and truth, we're trying to help people learn how to be full of grace and truth, embody that in their own context, in their own families, in their own neighborhoods. Deciding who to endorse, who not to endorse, why not to do all that. Well, it's driven by mission, discipleship, right? So it's really all about the core mission of the church, making disciples. And whether we're doing that for people inside the church, whether we're doing that with people outside the church, we're driven by that, even in the midst of the political conversation. So super helpful. And same thing we're aiming at in the book. So thank you.
Yeah, it's nothing more important than fiscal policy,
That
the things that matter so little in eternity.
So good.